Welcome to Adult ypww Lesson 8. I do not own the rights to this music. Today's topic is the little boy with 2 fish and 5 loaves, faith that releases multiplication. The lesson text is coming out of John chapter 6. The memory verses. I will read the King James Version first and then the New Living Translation of John chapter 6 verses 9 through 11. There is a lad here which hath 5 barley loaves and 2 small fishes. But what are they among so many? And Jesus said, Make the men sit down. Now there was much grass in the place. So the men sat down in number about 5,000. And Jesus took the loaves, and when he had given thanks, he distributed to the disciples, and the disciples to them that were set down, and likewise of the fishes as much as they would. The New Living Translation of John chapter 6, verses 9 through 11. There's a young boy here with 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. But what good is that with this huge crowd? Tell everyone to sit down, Jesus said. So they all sat down on the grassy slopes. The men alone numbered about 5,000. Then Jesus took the loaves, gave thanks to God, and distributed them to the people. Afterward, he did the same with the fish, and they all ate as much as they wanted. From John chapter 6, verses 9 to 11, the New Living Translation. The introduction. The miracle of the feeding of the multitude is one of the most familiar accounts in the Gospels, yet its simplicity often causes us to overlook its depth. Thousands gathered to hear Jesus Christ teach. And as the day wore on, a practical problem emerged. There was nothing to eat. Hunger met human limitation, and the disciples were forced to confront the gap between need and supply. In the middle of this overwhelming situation stands a small, easily overlooked figure. A little boy carrying 5 barley loaves and 2 small fish. He has no title, no authority, no voice recorded in Scripture. He does not preach, perform miracles, or even speak a word. Yet his willingness to release what he had into Jesus' hands becomes the catalyst for one of the greatest demonstrations of provision in Scripture. This lesson invites us to look closely at how God works through what seems insignificant. The miracle does not begin with abundance, it begins with surrender. The boy's lunch was not enough to solve the problem, but it was enough to start the miracle. Through this account, we learn that faith is not measured by how much we possess, but by our willingness to trust God with what we have. The discussion. The setting of John 6 places us in a moment of both spiritual hunger and physical need. A large crowd follows Jesus Christ because they have seen the signs he performed. They are drawn by miracles, teaching, and hope. Yet as the day progresses, their hunger becomes unavoidable. This tension between spiritual pursuit and human limitation sets the stage for divine revelation. Jesus does not ignore the practical need. Instead, he intentionally brings it into focus. Jesus initiates the moment by asking Philip where bread can be bought for the crowd. Scripture is careful to note that Jesus already knew what he would do. His question is not rooted in uncertainty, but in intention. He is testing the disciples not to expose ignorance, but to reveal perspective. Philip responds with calculation, estimating costs and concluding insufficiency. His answer is logical, reasonable, and completely inadequate because it leaves God out of the equation. This moment reveals how easily faith can be reduced to arithmetic when pleasure arises, or when pressure arises. Andrew's response moves the conversation slightly forward, but still falls short. He notices the little boy and acknowledges the loaves and fish, yet immediately qualifies the observation with doubt. But what are they among so many? Andrew recognizes provision. but cannot imagine multiplication. This tension reveals a middle ground many believers occupy. We can identify what is available, yet still doubt its usefulness. Faith that sees resources but cannot envision God's power is still constrained by human limitation. The presence of the little boy is quietly profound. He is unnamed, uncelebrated, and silent, yet central to the miracle. Unlike the disciples, he does not evaluate the size of the crowd against the size of his lunch. Scripture does not tell us how the food came into circulation, but it implies willingness. Someone had to release it. The boy's offering represents uncomplicated trust, faith that does not debate feasibility before surrendering. Barley loaves, the poorest quality bread, emphasizes the humility of the offering. This is not luxury food, it is the bread of the poor. The miracle does not begin with impressive resources, but with common provision. Scripture underscores that God often works through what society considers insignificant. The boy's lunch is small not only in quantity, but in perceived value. Jesus' response to the offering is deliberate and instructive. He does not rush to multiply. First, he commands the people to sit down, bringing order before abundance. Then he gives thanks. Thanksgiving precedes distribution. This act reveals a profound truth. Jesus blesses what appears insufficient. He does not wait for abundance to emerge before acknowledging God's provision. Gratitude becomes the gateway to multiplication. As the loaves and fish are distributed, Scripture records that everyone eats as much as they would. This phrase emphasizes satisfaction, not mere survival. God's provision is not minimal, it is generous. What began as scarcity becomes sufficiency, and sufficiency becomes surplus. The 12 baskets of leftovers testifies that God's economy does not operate on depletion, but on overflow. The number 12 is not incidental. It reflects completeness and provision for God's people. The miracle not only meets the immediate need, but reinforces a larger truth. When God provides, He does so in a way that leaves testimony behind. The fragments gathered are not waste, they are evidence. Evidence that God can take what is small, bless it, and produce more than what was originally offered. This discussion reveals that the miracle is not merely about feeding a crowd. It is about reshaping how faith understands provision. The disciples see lack. Jesus sees opportunity. The boy releases what he has. God reveals what he can do. Together, the story unfolds as a living lesson in trust, surrender, and divine multiplication. The application. The little boy teaches us that faith does not wait for abundance before responding. Many believers delay obedience because they believe they do not have enough time, enough resources, enough confidence, or enough faith. This story confronts that mindset directly. God does not ask us to bring what we do not have. He asks us to bring what we do have. Like the disciples, we often focus on the size of the problem rather than the power of God. We measure our contribution against the need and conclude that it is too small to matter. Yet the miracle does not require our sufficiency. It requires our surrender. The boy's offering was not impressive, but it was available. This lesson also challenges our understanding of ownership. The loaves and fish became effective only after they were released into Jesus' hands. As long as the lunch stayed with the boy, he could feed one person. Once surrendered, it fed thousands. Faith involves letting go of control and trusting God to use what we release. This story reminds us that multiplication follows consecration. Jesus blessed the offering before breaking it. What is blessed by God is empowered to multiply. When believers consecrate their resources, talents, and time to God, He uses them in ways that exceed natural limits. This lesson invites us to examine what we may be holding tightly out of fear. Are we withholding because we believe our contribution is too small? Are we waiting for more before we obey? The little boy teaches us that faith is not about size, it is about willingness. The conclusion: the miracle of the loaves and fish reminds us that God's greatest works often begin with ordinary obedience. A nameless child with a small lunch becomes part of a miracle that still speaks centuries later. His story assures us that God sees what others overlook and uses what others dismiss. This lesson declares that scarcity does not limit God, unwillingness does. When what we have is placed in God's hands, He transforms it. The little boy could not feed the multitude, but his obedience made room for God to do so. In God's economy, surrender precedes supply. Ultimately, this story reveals that faith is not about how much we bring, but to whom we bring it. When what we have is placed in God's hands, He multiplies it beyond our capacity. He multiplies it to meet needs we could never meet alone. God still takes small offerings, blesses them, breaks them, and uses them to bless many. The questions for today's lesson: number one, why do you think Jesus tested the disciples before performing the miracle? Number two, what does the boy's willingness teach us about faith and obedience? Number three, how does this story challenge the belief that our contribution must be large to matter? Number four, what might God be asking you to place in His hands right now? And number five, how does gratitude and consecration prepare the way for multiplication? The end. God bless you and thank you for joining me today.